Yes, good afternoon to all of you. Shall we start? Or you want to take a little bit more time? Pardon? Okay. So, yesterday we have seen what is e-governance and what are all the problems related to e-governance in India. What are the major issues? What are the challenges? Why e-governance in India has not become as successful as it should have been? We said that it was not successful because in the name of e-governance we have only implemented e-government. We have restricted ourselves only to computerization. Beyond that, none of other reforms we have implemented. Reducing the number of hierarchy levels, merging of ministries and departments, making citizen charters mandatory, having social audit mechanisms, implementation of right to information, because of which e-governance has not achieved most of its objectives. E-governance was supposed to ensure a good governance, but in reality it has only resulted in bad governance. That is what we have mentioned. And then we spoke about the infrastructural problems, security related issues, lack of awareness, and most of the governance being carried out in English language, and absence of a private sector participation. And these are all the problems we have discussed, which ultimately we have mentioned that the government must define the objectives of e-governance. The objective should be to ensure transparency, accountability, and efficiency, and also to have responsive service delivery mechanisms. We gave the example through FIRs. We have these e-FIRs. Even this is also not working. AC. This also is not working. Okay, right. Just because my name is Pavan, they think they thought that I don't require any, right? We should not go by names, right? The person the name might be Ram, but he might have married 100 times, right? So don't go by names. So coming back here, that is what we have mentioned. We have to define the objectives of e-governance, and these objectives should be defined in a quantifiable terms so that we can evaluate the performance. We also have mentioned that we have to focus on improving infrastructure. Only 28% of people in our country have access to broadband internet, and we said that since we cannot improve infrastructure overnight, the solution is we can have mobile governance. Let the governments come out with the mobile applications. But the most important thing is that we need to focus on governance rather than computerization. You can have as many mobile applications as you want, but if there are no responsive mechanisms, then e-governance again is going to be a failure. We need to implement all other reforms. That's what we have mentioned. So that is what all about re-governance. Let us move forward and look at other topic. We have to look at these topics that are left. We have to look at this role of civil services in a democracy. We have to look at these topics, the role of civil services in a democracy. Then we have to look at the impact of globalization on public administration. We have to look at the impact of globalization on public administration. Then we have to look at civil services reforms. Civil services reforms. These are the topics which we have to discuss, right? Yes. Exactly. That's what I have mentioned yesterday also. India has done tremendously in terms of digital public infrastructure. As the World Bank has rightly pointed out, what India has done in the last 6 years is equal to what other countries can imagine for 60 years. The way we have improved our digital public infrastructure, it is incredible in the last 6 years. Using this UPI, using Aadhaar, using your mobile governance. These are all the things. We have drastically reduced corruption in implementation of service delivery mechanisms, corruption in implementation of developmental and welfare schemes. Thanks to this e-governance, thanks to this digital public infrastructure, we could transform transfer lakhs of crores of rupees into the accounts of people. You go by economic survey, in the last 9 years, the government of India has transferred more than 28 lakh crores of rupees into the accounts of people without a single rupee of corruption. These are all the advantages of e-governance. These are all the benefits of e-governance. We could reduce corruption, we could improve the quality of service delivery mechanisms, we could make bureaucracy efficient, and we could reduce red tapeism within administration. All the objectives yesterday we have mentioned. But in spite of all these objectives, all these successes, we should also not forget what are the problems. We have mentioned, as I said, please read this economic survey, this year's economic survey. In this economic survey, there is a topic, a separate topic called Digital India, where you find all this information. I told you also that you must go through that also. Wherein they had given all these successes of e-governance, this Digital India campaign. Through BharatNet project, we have successfully connected all the panchayat offices through e-governance. Right? These are all the these are all the successes of our e-governance, in spite of so many limitations. This UPI project, this is more successful than what most of the developing countries can ever imagine also. That is the reason why recently in the G20 summit also, most of these ambassadors and the presidents were taken to these markets, wherein even the small vegetable sellers also were using UPI. It is one of the biggest successes. That's what World Bank also has said. These are all the successes. But normally, UPSC cannot see anything good, so they will ask all the questions about criticism only. Exactly. Positives of land reform, that is in your economy. Because since there were no, so you can write, I'm sorry, there are no positives. Yeah. For example, the question that was asked also this year in your GS paper 3. What are the positives of land reforms? Yes, I'm asking the question. It is partially successful in Kerala and West Bengal. Yes, okay. I'm talking about positives. You are talking about, you are saying that there is no further consolidation of land holdings, but there is huge amount of fragmentation of land holdings. At the time of independence, what is the average size of a farmer, average size of land of a farmer? What is it now? It has come down drastically. So you have to invent those things, right? Anyway, that's part of your economy. Honestly, we will not go into all those things. Let us come back to our governance only, right? So please remember, land reforms does not mean only land ceiling legislation. Land reforms include cooperative farming, corporate farming. This is where you have to write all those positives, right? In the recent past, especially in the last 25 years, we have done remarkably well in terms of this cooperative farming as well as corporate farming. That is all part of land reforms only, right? So let us come back to the role of civil services in a democracy. So what are we discussing here? We are looking at what we call what you are going to do when you get into services. Tomorrow you become IAS officer. Let us assume, only assumption, nothing else, right? Otherwise, on Saturday afternoon, you will have daydreams only. So let us assume that you have become an IAS officer. What you will do? What are your functions? Exactly, very good. But you cannot write those things in the examination, right? Please, right? You have to restrain yourself, your emotions and sentiments. You have to keep in control. You want to become correct, which is fine, no problem. But don't write those things. That is the reason why you have ethics paper. Ethics paper, what is the case study? It says that a contractor will come and give you bribes. What will you do? You will not take it. Why? Because the bribe amount is very so less. So you will say that there are some standards I have to maintain, right? As I told you, one of my students in Bihar, he was a collector there, very young. First attempt he got IAS, 21 years. 25 years he had become collector. In Bihar, he will become collector within 4 years. And one day, superintendent of police had come to meet him. SP basically from state services. Through promotions he had become SP. He was about to retire. He said that we are constructing a colony for the police officers, police officials, and we have identified land. Tomorrow when you are a district collector, you are also the head of all the government land in the district. You have the power to allocate this land to various purposes. And he said that please allocate us some government land for us to construct houses for ourselves. And this guy has said that no problem, I will allocate. You please identify the land and I will give you that. And the land was identified, and he had given the land. After some time, this SP had come again to this office of this guy, and he said that he came with a suitcase. He said that this is your share, because normally what happens, how this corruption takes place, the land which is identified is very less in terms of market value outside the cities. So what they will do is that they would make sure that the government will buy the land at very high prices. If the market price is say 1 crore, the government will be asked to buy the land at 2 crores. And out of this 2 crores, a 1 crore profit, 50 lakhs will be given to the bureaucrats. That is how corruption takes place in the government. So this guy, this superintendent of police, he came and he said that, sir, this is your share, around 50 lakh rupees. What share? He said, we have done this land dealing, so you have signed it. So that is the share of the landowners. They said that this is your share and you have to take it. And he said that, do you think that you can buy me with only 50 lakh rupees? Standards are very high. No, he is one of the most honest bureaucrats. That's the reason why he was transferred almost after every 6 months. And he was, once he had beaten the local MLA also. Yeah, he went, there was some communal rights. The MLA was hiding in a house, and he was the one who was responsible. And he asked the police to break open the door, and he went and beaten a local MLA also. And of course, by the time he came out, he was also transferred. These are all the things you study in your ethics paper: honesty, integrity, courage of conviction. They are all there only in the books. They should not be there in reality. He was transferred so many times. In almost 10 years, he was transferred 30 times. Right? What happens? There are very few bureaucrats like that. Right? And of course, at the end of the day, you will also get recognition. He has been identified by the central government. At a very young age, he has been given a very important responsibility. This JNTP, Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust, is there, JNPT, Mumbai, one of the most busiest ports in India. Right now, he's been made the vice chairman of the port by the central government. He came on deputation to the central government, and he was made the vice chairman. So the government always recognizes honest bureaucrats. Initially, you might be facing problems, but the government also needs those kind of bureaucrats, honest bureaucrats. Because if everyone is corrupt, the system would collapse. So anyway, those are all the things which you should be studying as part of your ethics paper. Let us come back and look at what we are discussing here. A role of civil services in a democracy. So what are you going to do when you become a district collector or when you become an IAS officer, what are your functions? So do you know what you are going to do when you become a IAS officer? Pardon? Implementation of policies, okay. Understanding ground realities. That is the reason why this topic is included in our examination, right? Because otherwise everyone will write only corruption, right? So what are you going to do? So we have what is called parliamentary democracy, right? As we studied in our polity, in a parliamentary democracy, we said that cabinet is the highest decision making body, highest policy making body, and cabinet consists of politicians. It consists of politicians. Do these politicians have any kind of skills or experience or knowledge about administration? And as we study, policy formulation is a highly technical activity. It is a technical activity. It requires not a lot of specialized knowledge. It requires a lot of specialized knowledge. And politicians don't have this kind of knowledge because their profession is politics. It is not administration. Their profession is politics. So most of the politicians, they don't know basic tenets of administration also. You are a chief minister, but go and ask any chief minister what is the difference between a revenue deficit and a primary deficit. By the way, what is the difference between revenue deficit and primary deficit? Even you are not chief minister, still also you don't know, right? So that is where the problem is. The problem is that politicians, their profession is politics but not administration. And policy formulation is a highly technical activity. So as a civil servant, you are providing inputs to the political executive in policy formulation. And once the politicians decide the broad policies, you are, as a civil servant, as a secretary, as additional secretary, as joint secretary, as a civil servant, you are filling in all the details related to policies. That is what we call it as a delegated legislation. Through delegated legislation, you are the one who will be filling in all the details related to policy. Recently, Parliament has passed in a data protection and data privacy bill. This bill comes under this Ministry of Science and Technology and Information Technology, Science and IT and Communications. Does it mean that the minister has formulated the bill, running it hundreds of pages? Who will be writing all those bills? Bureaucrats, through delegated legislation. That is what you will be doing. As a bureaucrat, your responsibility is to write all the bills. And then before that, politicians we have mentioned are responsible for policy formulation. And what is the problem here with the politicians? What is the problem with politicians? Whenever they come out with policies, they are only interested in winning elections. They are only interested in winning elections. So they have only what is called very short-term perspective. Short-term perspective. Most of the policies will be populistic in nature. Populistic, as you know, all these freebies, subsidies. As a bureaucrat, you are supposed to provide unbiased, meritorious, rational, and impartial suggestions to the political executive in policy formulation. For example, if the health minister comes out with a policy called PMJAY, Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, and you have to tell the health minister, Mr. Minister, be the first beneficiary of this program, go to Gangaram Hospital and check your brain. That is what we say. Because what is required in India, we must improve health infrastructure. These are the things we will be studying as part of health and education also, social issues. You need to improve health infrastructure, especially primary health care centers. You have to improve the functioning of the government hospitals. See what happened recently in Maharashtra. Does this PMJAY help in those things? Obviously not. And similarly, when agriculture minister says that we will give more cash into the accounts of people. Right now we are giving 6,000 rupees. So next year elections we will give 12,000 rupees. Again you have to tell the agriculture minister, go to rural areas, start doing the farming, find out the problems of the people. That is what we say. As a bureaucrat, you are what is called part of a permanent executive. Politicians are temporary. They'll be there only for a period of 5 years. But once you are in service, you'll be there for next 35 years. Do you have to get yourself elected after every 5 years? No. So that is the reason why you don't have to be populistic. You can take into consideration rationality, economic rationality, cost benefit analysis, and give those kind of impartial, unbiased suggestions. That is the reason why in your ethics paper you will be studying about a lot of values that a civil servant must possess. I don't know whether you have studied or not. You must have studied. If it is, you have honesty, integrity, courage of conviction, selflessness, impartiality, non-partisanship, objectivity, rationality. Why? Because these are all the values that a civil servant must possess. Then only he can provide unbiased, impartial, rational, and meritorious suggestions to the political executive. You are Secretary, Finance Ministry. You are Secretary, Agriculture Ministry. You are Secretary, Education Ministry. You have to provide those kind of suggestions. This is the most important role to be played by civil services or civil servants in a parliamentary democracy. It is for the politicians to accept or reject your suggestions, because as we have discussed, a cabinet is the highest policy making body. People have elected that political party to form the government, and the Prime Minister has the power to select his council of ministers. And these council of ministers headed by the Prime Minister are responsible for policy formulation. Since council of ministers is a much bigger body, it is the cabinet that takes the decisions on behalf of council of ministers. This is what we studied in polity. So as a civil servant, your job is to provide suggestions. You have to speak truth. That is the reason why we say honesty. You must put the interests of the people, the government, the country, in forefront. That is the reason why we say integrity. And you must give completely rational suggestions. That is the reason why we say rationality. And you must be selfless, because tomorrow if you give the suggestion which may not be liked by the politician, they can transfer you. They can transfer you. And that is where selflessness, that is where courage of conviction comes into picture. You need to have all these values, then only you can become a true civil servant. Civil servant means servant of the people. You are not the servant of the government, you are the servant of the people. Civil servant. So this is the first task that you have to perform. Make sure that you are providing these kind of unbiased, rational, meritorious, and impartial suggestions to the political executive in policy formulation. Next, once policies are formulated, the next important function you have to perform is you have to implement policies. Once the policies are formulated, you have to implement the policies. And how should you implement the policies? You have to implement policies strictly according to rules and regulations. You should not show any kind of prejudices or biases. You should not show any kind of nepotism or favoritism in implementing the policies. Everything should be done strictly according to rule of law. That is the reason why this rule of law becomes very important. As a civil servant, you have to implement those policies strictly according to the guidelines issued by the government. I gave you this example. You should not have any kind of prejudices or biases or values. An old woman comes to your house in the middle of the night. You are a district collector, and she is not carrying any documents to show that she is poor. You have to follow rules and regulations. That is what is called Weberian bureaucracy. You have to follow those rules and regulations, and you have to make sure that you are not violating those rules and regulations. If she is not carrying any documents, you have to tell her that you cannot help her. Very simple. And that is where in our ethics paper almost every case study is about these things only. Legality versus morality. If you follow rules and regulations, can you help that old woman? If you help that old woman, is it legal? Then what will you do? That is what entire ethics paper case studies are about. But the service conduct rules and regulations say that clearly you have to follow them. You cannot violate the rules and regulations. You cannot violate. You talk to any IAS officer who has joined the services recently and who is about to retire from services. Both of them will say only one thing: they simply cannot violate any rules and regulations. Why? Because these rules and regulations will make sure that you will not be using your discretionary powers. You will not be indulging in any prejudices and biases, nepotism and favoritism. So the second most important function is implementing the policies. Yes. Exactly. Very good question. If you have to follow rules and regulations, why should you be moral or ethical? Why should you be moral or ethical? Yeah. Pardon? It seems that you don't have any discretionary powers, but you still have discretionary powers. Very simple here. You are a district collector. Again, assume. Right? You are a district collector. So, the government has constructed around 5,000 houses in your district under PMAY, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, rural. And you have been asked to allocate those houses. And what is the criteria? The houses should be given to people living below poverty line. Houses should be given to people belonging to scheduled castes or scheduled tribes. Houses should be given to women or minorities or other backward sections. That is the criteria. And houses should be given to those who do not have any houses. You cannot be giving houses to all those who already have houses. And 5,000 houses are there, and there are at least 2 lakh people in the district who fulfill all this criteria. And you have to decide who are those 5,000 people. That is what we call discretionary powers. You have to take a decision who should be those 5,000 people. And this is where you face the problems. Local MLA will come with his own list of 5,000 people. Local, this MPD, this president, Mandal Panchayat president, he will come out with his own list. The JP, Jilla Parishad president, he will come out with his own list. Local MP will come out with his own list. And the minister will send his own list. Whom will you give? So you don't give anything to him, you keep all these houses with yourself only. Right? That is what we say discretionary powers. Rule of law, as we study, always has this inherent discretion, because law cannot be there for all the situations. Law is only for generalized situations. In specific circumstances, you have to use your discretionary powers. That is where ethics will come into picture. You have to give the houses on the basis of your understanding of the poverty of people, on the basis of your comprehension of the difficulties faced by the weakest sections of society, and then you can decide who should be the beneficiaries. This is where you need ethics. You need all those values. You need empathy. You should be able to understand the sufferings. And that is where you can become a good administrator. So This is what the next important function that you have to perform, the role of civil services. The second important function you have to perform here is you have to implement the policies. Next, what are the other functions that you have to perform? Next important function that you have to perform is you have to maximize revenues for the government. Revenue generation functions. Next important function is that you have to maximize revenues for the government. As a civil servant, you will be collecting revenues for the government. You are an income tax officer, you are a customs officer, and you are collecting the revenues for the government. You have to make sure that the revenues of the government are maximized. You are a district collector. You have to make sure that the revenues of the government are maximized from your district. Second Administrative Reforms Commission has mentioned it as one of the functions of the district collector. From where they can get maximum revenues for the state governments? What is the most important source of revenue for a state government? Sale of liquor. Why do you have to think so much also? Sale of liquor. So second ERC has suggested that district collector must make sure that he is maximizing revenue from the sale of liquor. So you have to ask the people, please drink for the sake of the health of the country. Right? That is the reason why, as I said in your ethics paper, the question was also asked. As an army man, you can showcase your patriotism by sacrificing your life for the country. But as a civilian, how do you show your patriotism? Exactly. You are trying to, you do not mind, destroying your health for the sake of the country. And you are doing it in a selfless manner. Right? Next time onwards, those who drink, let us have some kind of respect for them. They are the biggest patriots the country can ever imagine. Not Mahatma Gandhi or Jawaharlal Nehru. Gandhi is not at all. Gandhi never. Right? Gandhi is a traitor. Right? Because he asked people not to drink. After 1935 Government of India Act, Congress party governments had come to power in various provinces. So Gandhi met all the chief ministers. He had requested all of them, please ban the sale of liquor in all your provinces. And the chief ministers took a decision. They banned Mahatma Gandhi. So the chief ministers have said that yes, Gandhi, we will ban it. But where are the revenues? We have to spend money on education, health, roads, buildings, irrigation, infrastructure, industries. Where do we get this money? So they said that we cannot. That is the reason why, as we studied, it is banning liquor is part of directive principles of state policy. Right? So this another important thing that you have to do is you have to maximize revenues. Next important function you have to perform is law and order. You have to maintain law and order. No development can take place without law and order. Capitalism requires a stable society, and it is your responsibility to ensure law and order. As a civil servant, as a police officer, you are responsible for maintaining law and order. And what else will you do? Please remember, all these questions have been asked in your ethics paper only. Role of public administration. It has been asked so many times. Role of public administration or role of civil services. Right? Next important function that you have to perform is you have to bring about socio-economic transformation. You have to bring about socio-economic transformation of the society as a civil servant. What do you mean by socio-economic transformation? A transformation means a change. Long-lasting change is what we call it as transformation. The social transformation. What is the social transformation? Again, these are all asked in your ethics paper only, please remember. What is the sociological transformation? Social transformation of the society means what? Our society is characterized by so many inequalities, so much of discrimination, so much of exploitation in the name of religion, in the name of caste, in the name of gender, in the name of a region or language or ethnicity or race. You have to make sure that all these sections of society are brought at par in terms of development. Women, children, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and OBCs, minorities. You have to ensure that all these people who are at the bottom of the pyramid are empowered, are given more opportunities to develop themselves. Social transformation of the society. That is what, as a civil servant, you are expected to do. How can you do those things? By implementing all the welfare schemes for those sections of society, by making sure that they will benefit from those schemes of the government. We have hundreds of schemes in governance for all these sections of society. Next, what else you have to do? Economic transformation. What do we mean by economic transformation? What do we mean by economic transformation? You have to ensure rapid economic growth and development. What do we mean by that? You have to increase the GDP, per capita income, improve the standard of life. You have to ensure a job-led growth, provide more employment opportunities to the people. You have to improve infrastructure. You have to ensure industrialization. All this is part of economic transformation. And as a civil servant, you are responsible for bringing about this socio-economic transformation. Next, what are the other functions that you are performing? You are also responsible for running large-scale public sector enterprises. All these public sector enterprises are right now run by civil servants only. Large-scale public sector enterprise. You must be studying these things in your economy also. These public sector enterprises continue to play a very, very important role, even in this age of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. They are contributing handsomely to your infrastructure, to your growth and development. And as a civil servant, you are responsible for this maintenance of a large-scale public sector enterprise. Next function you have to perform as a civil servant is, you must ensure stability and continuity to administrative process during times of instability, political instability. You must ensure stability and continuity to administrative process during the times of political instability. For example, right now Jammu and Kashmir is in a president's rule. There are no MLAs or MPs or ministers or chief minister. Does it mean that the entire administration had come to a standstill? No. Who will be running the administration? You will be running the administration, the IAS officers and the IPS officers. Similarly, right now elections are announced in 5 states. Model code of conduct has also come into existence. And who will be running the administration? Bureaucracy. Can the politicians take any decisions, the chief ministers or council ministers? No. Can they transfer officials? No. And who will be running the entire administration? Bureaucracy. That is what we say, ensuring stability and continuity to administrative process during the times of political instability. This is another important function performed by civil servants in a democracy. Next function is, these civil servants, we call them as the leaders in the society. They are the role models. They are the role models. As role models, you must influence positively the attitudes, values and behaviors of people in the society. If you stand up to a minister and if you don't allow the ministers to become corrupt, then you will automatically become a role model. You don't mind being transferred, but you will not allow the corruption. Please remember, within the government, corruption cannot take place without the help of bureaucracy. And if all the bureaucrats are honest, then can there be any corruption? No. It is only the bureaucrats who are willing to bend themselves. That is what we have discussed in corruption. What does it mean by corruption? To bend. Who are willing to bend themselves to the pressure of the political executive, that we have systematic corruption. If the bureaucrats are honest, they are fearless, if they are, if they have courage of conviction, then it becomes almost impossible for politicians to indulge in corruption. They cannot, because at the end of the day, whose signature will be there on the files? Bureaucrats. And that is what we say, as a civil servant, you are the role model for the people in the country, because politicians do not enjoy much of credibility. They don't have much of credibility in the society. As we said when we discuss about judicial activism also, why people still welcome judicial activism? Because of lack of credibility of both the legislature and executive in the eyes of people. In legislature, we have more than 40% of our MPs are having criminal records. And similarly, most of the chief ministers also have so many cases against them. So politicians do not enjoy that kind of credibility. That is the reason why we still want to have judicial activism. We still want to give that benefit of doubt to judiciary. In the same manner, if the bureaucrats are honest, they can also become role models because of their honesty with their courage of conviction. And this is what they are expected to do in a democracy. This is what we say, role of civil services in a democracy. Let us take all these points. As I said, the questions have been asked regularly in both polity, governance and ethics papers about this topic. Role of civil services in a democracy, you can write. In a parliamentary democracy, political executive is responsible for policy formulation, political executive is responsible for policy formulation, whereas bureaucracy is for its implementation. Bureaucracy is for its implementation. Cabinet is the highest policy making body. Cabinet is the highest policy making body. It is the highest policy making body. But cabinet consists of professional politicians who do not have any skills or knowledge, related to administration. Policy making is a highly technical activity. Policy making is a highly technical activity which require specialized skills and knowledge. Next paragraph. Civil servants are professional administrators. Professional administrators who possess those skills and knowledge. They are expected to provide unbiased, comma meritorious, unbiased, comma meritorious, comma impartial, and rational suggestions, to political executive in policy formulation. They are part of a permanent executive. Whereas ministers are part of a temporary executive. Temporary. What do you mean by temporary executive? They will be there only for 5 years. Mostly, next paragraph, mostly the ministers are guided by short-term political populism. Ministers are guided by short-term political populism. In policy formulation. Which can have adverse consequences, ADVERSE, adverse consequences for the country in the long term. Next paragraph. Civil servants must take into consideration long-term consequences and provide rational suggestions to political executive in policy formulation. Next paragraph. Once policy decisions are made by the cabinet, civil servants are expected to implement policies strictly according to rules and regulations. Strictly according to rules and regulations. Next function. Civil servants are also expected to maximize revenues for the government by eliminating the scope for corruption and leakages. Next function. Maintenance of law and order. Maintenance of law and order is one of the most important functions performed by civil services. Performed by civil servants. It is necessary to ensure rapid economic growth. To ensure rapid economic growth. Political stability, policy certainty, and continuity are prerequisites for success of capitalist societies. For success of capitalist societies. Next function. Civil servants are expected to bring about socio-economic transformation. Socio-economic transformation of the society. Social transformation in the form of empowerment of socially backward sections of society. Socially backward sections of society, including scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, other backward castes, minorities, and women. Economic transformation includes maximizing GDP growth, increasing per capita income, and standard of life, ensuring job-led growth, next enhancing productive capacities of economic system, by improving infrastructure and industrialization. This is another function they are expected to perform. Next function. Civil servants are also responsible for implementation of developmental and welfare schemes developmental and welfare schemes of central and state governments. More than 580 schemes are implemented and it is the civil servants who must ensure that the benefits would reach the targeted sections of society. The targeted sections of society. Targeted sections of society. Next function. During the times of political instability, it is the civil servants who are expected to ensure stability and continuity to administrative process. Stability and continuity to administrative process. For example, when a state is under a president's rule, or when model code of conduct is in operation, it is the civil servants model code of conduct is in operation, it is the civil servants who will ensure continuity to administrative process. Right. Next, in a federal polity, civil servants play a significant role in realizing the objectives of cooperative federalism. Next, civil servants are also the role models for other people in the society. Through their impeccable IMPECCABLA honesty, and integrity, they must influence the attitudes, values, and behaviors of ordinary citizens. Next, in a socialistic pattern of society, come a public sector enterprises. Public sector enterprises play a very significant role. In realizing the objectives of socialism. Civil servants are expected to ensure that these public sector enterprises function efficiently so that they can maximize the objectives of socialism. So that is what we say role of civil services in a democracy, right? This is what you are all expected to do as and when, or if and when, right? Yes, but rest of the objectives keep in your mind only. What are they? Yes, you know all of them, right? For example, if you become a police officer, you are getting bored, go out and start killing people and say that they are all Naxalites and terrorists, and you say that you have killed all of them under UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. So this is what we say about role of civil services. I said many questions have been asked in your ethics paper about this only, role of public administration or role of civil services. So proceeding further, we have to look at what is the impact of globalization on public administration. Then we have to look at Max Weber's concept of bureaucracy. And was it done in your ethics papers? No. Yes or no? Okay, very good. Okay. Yes. You are saying yes to yes or no to no. Right. So let us look at the changing role of public administration. What is the changing role of public administration in the age of globalization? Changing role of public administration in the age of globalization. So what we have discussed till now are the functions to be performed by civil services in a democracy. Now we have to look at what is the changing role of civil services, changing role of public administration in the age of globalization. Again, in our governance, very good number of questions are asked about the changing role of public administration in the age of globalization. So first of all, what is this liberalization, privatization and globalization? What is the difference between liberalization, privatization and globalization? So for that, let us briefly look at a little bit of economic history of India. Immediately after independence, as all of us know, India has opted for a socialistic pattern of society, wherein we have opted for centralized planning process and monopoly of public sector enterprises. These public sector enterprises were given absolute monopoly over production as well as over service delivery mechanisms, and the private sector was controlled through what is called LQP Raj, license quota permit Raj. So the government of India had invested heavily in these public sector enterprises. And where did this money come from? For this investment, the government of India has taken huge amount of loans to invest in public sector enterprises. So from the first 5-year plan, especially from second 5-year plan onwards, our planning process has changed. By the end of the 7th 5-year plan, that is 1990, by the end of 7th 5-year plan, you must have studied planning and all these things. By the end of the 7th 5-year plan, our economy was not doing the way we have imagined. We expected these public sector enterprises to become the engines of growth, the vehicles of transformation, economic transformation. But that was not the case. In spite of the fact that we have given them protection in the form of monopoly, they never really performed well. The government invested heavily and most of them were incurring losses. By 1990, we had more than 240 central public sector enterprises, out of which half of them were incurring losses. And the net profit was only 5,000 crores. And the government was investing 1,25,000 crores every year with a profit of 5,000 crores. It is less than 4% profits. Whereas the government had taken this 1,25,000 crores at an interest rate of almost 18 to 20%. Before 1990s, we say that India was a high cost economy because the rate of interest used to be very, very high. So what happened, as we study in economy, what is the basic principle behind taking loans? The basic principle, we say that IRR should be more than ROI. What is this IRR and ROI? IRR is what we call internal rate of return on the investment should be more than the rate of interest that you are paying. Then only we say that investment is, please remember all these questions have been asked in your GS economy only. They're asking mostly these kind of conceptual questions in GS economy. Prelims I'm talking about, prelims. So the IRR, internal rate of return, should be more than the rate of interest. But the government had taken the loans at 18% rate of interest. The rate of return was only 4%. That is when all these investments had become loss-making ones. These public sector enterprises had become white elephants. What is a white elephant? What is a white elephant? Have you heard about this one? What is a white elephant? Pardon? Yes, white elephants. Yes, white elephants means the cost of maintenance of asset is unbearable. The cost of maintenance of assets is unbearable. What are the examples of white elephants? Pardon? Very good. Right, very good. You have realized. Okay. So that is what it happened. And finally, what was the result? By 1990, Indian economy had collapsed. The Gulf War, Iraq has occupied Kuwait, and America declared war on Iraq. and Indian economy has collapsed. That is the reason why right now India is also fearing what will happen if the war extends to some more period of time, because India is 80% of our petroleum imports come from foreign countries only, mostly this Gulf region only. Nowadays Russia is also there, but still if the war continues, automatically the prices of crude will go up, and it will create a havoc enough for countries like India. So that is what exactly happened. By 1991 our economy has collapsed, and we did not have sufficient foreign exchange reserves to finance even 3 weeks of our imports, and that was when we were forced to change our economic policies. We have opted for liberalization, privatization and globalization. Liberalization, why it is called liberalization? It means that you are removing controls over the functioning of a private sector. You are liberalizing the functioning of a private sector. How? By dismantling the license quota permit Raj, giving complete freedom to the private sector to start industries, by ending the monopoly of public sector enterprises. You have given complete freedom to the private sector. Privatization, you are transferring the ownership of public sector enterprises to the private sector to reduce your losses, to reduce the burden of white elephants. You are selling them. And globalization, you are opening up of your economy to the rest of the world. And before that, we had what is called autarky. What is this autarky? This was asked in your prelims only last year, before last year in your economy. This was asked in your prelims, autarky. Autarky means a closed economic system. India was isolated. Closed economic system. We did not allow any imports or exports. We did not allow any trade or investment. We have imposed severe restrictions on trade and investment. From 1950s till 1990, we have not allowed. We have lived in complete isolation. Why? Because the Britishers had come to India as traders, and then they went on to occupy the country. So it was felt that if we have allowed multinational companies immediately after independence, there would be one more imperialism. That is the reason why we had to protect our country from these multinational companies. That is the reason why we had this autarky, closed economic system. And what did we do? By 1990, we have decided that we have become strong enough to face these multinational companies. We are ready to benefit out of foreign multinational companies, their trade and their investment. That is the reason why we have opted for globalization. And now the question that we are asking here is, what is the role of public administration in this age of globalization? What is the role of civil services? What is the role of the state in the age of globalization? Why this question is coming up? Because before 1991, the state performed all the functions which you have written. All the functions were performed by the state: policy formulation, implementation, production of goods and services, running public sector enterprises, implementation of developmental and welfare schemes, maintenance of law and order, generation of revenue. All these functions were performed only by the state. Before 1990s, the private sector was controlled through licenses, quotas and permits. And there were no NGOs. There were no civil society organizations, as we have discussed. These NGOs before 1990s were restricted only to small pockets, performing limited functions. And suddenly, after 1990s, we have opted for this liberalization, privatization, globalization, wherein the private sector and markets, multinational companies and civil society organizations, NGOs and pressure groups started playing a very important role in our development process. So in this age of globalization, In this age of what is called multi-actor paradigm, the question that has been asked so many times in our governance. In this age of a multi-actor paradigm model of governance, what is the role of civil services? What is the role of public administration in this changed scenario of globalization? That is what we have to look at. So what is the role of public administration? What is the role of the state? What do you think is the role of the state in this age of globalization? What is the role of the state? To maintain law and order, okay. Inclusive growth, okay. Okay, to facilitate the process of growth and development, okay. Pardon? That is what we said, facilitate. That is what the same thing, facilitate. And all of you are repeating the same point. For this, you should know what are the positive and the negative consequences of globalization. What is the impact of globalization on our societies? Have you studied these things, the society or social issues? No. Very good. For everything you have a ready-made answer. It does not really matter if you studied or not studied. The answer is always no. So what is the problem with markets? What is the problem with globalization? Increased inequalities. Okay, fine. Then westernization, that is impact on the society culture. Okay. Neo-imperialism. Okay. Pardon? Consumerist culture. Okay, fine. Crony capitalism. Competition is there or not? Increasing competition. It is good, I think. We need more competition. McDonaldization of food habits. Very good. Right. What do you want? Paratization? What do you want? Yes. Health. Okay. Yes, whatever you are saying are right. As usual, we will put it in a more civilized manner to write in the answers. Right. So what this globalization has done, it has so many positive benefits. At the same time, there are so many negative consequences also. As an administrator, what you have to do? You must maximize the positive outcomes and minimize negative externalities. That is what you are expected to do. And that is the reason why there are so many ethics case studies about these things only. What are these ethics case studies? You know, why did UPSC include those case studies? Tomorrow all of you are going to be administrators. What did we say about governance? Taking decisions and implementing them. You are expected to take decisions. Whether you have the ability to take decisions or not, that is what UPSC would like to see as part of ethics case studies. Why? Because whenever you have the alternatives, whenever you have the choices, taking decision would become very difficult. Why? Because life is not what we call black and white. It is not about right and wrong. The reality is always in between, right and wrong. For example, you are constructing an irrigation project. It will benefit millions of farmers, but at the same time lakhs of people also will be affected, displacement. So will you start the project or not? That is what in a case study. That is what it is. Similarly, a big multinational company is coming to your locality and they will be providing employment, they will be improving infrastructure, but at the same time they will be using your resources, forests, mineral resources. It can lead to environmental degradation. what will you do? Will you give approval for the project or not? That is what is case study. Decision making. Because no decision can ever said to be completely right or totally wrong. So as a civil servant, whether you have the ability to analyze the opportunity, the alternatives in front of you and take decisions or not. That is why you require knowledge of administration, knowledge of governance. And that is the reason why UPS included these things in our governance. And that's why both this governance and ethics are interrelated. Right? So coming back here, looking at globalization, what are the major benefits, what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? This globalization can bring in the much needed investment. As we study in our economy, whatever may be the ism, capitalism or a socialism, the only way a country can progress is through investment. Only investment can ensure progress. And through globalization, this investment is brought to your country by multinational companies. They can bring in more technologies. They can bring in a skilled manpower. They can bring in much needed finances. They can bring in more machinery, modern. That is the reason why you need globalization. You need these markets. You need the private sector. Why? Because inclusive growth, as the topic that was asked in your essay paper, is not possible without growth. Can there be any inclusive growth without growth? Obviously not. And who can ensure this growth, rapid economic growth? Capitalism, private sector, markets, multinational companies. That is the reason why we have opted for LPG. And because of which, since 1991, when we have opted for LPG, till now, the country has experienced rapid economic growth. What was our GDP in 1990? What is our GDP now? It has seen huge amount of increase. In 1991, we did not have foreign exchange resources that were not sufficient for even 3 weeks of our imports. Now, we have the 5th largest country in the world in terms of foreign exchange reserves. That is what it has done. But at the same time, this globalization and market-based economies have so many weaknesses. First and foremost, this globalization and liberalization and market-based economies, they will result in what we call the creation of islands of prosperity in an ocean of poverty. Take the case of India only. Out of 28 states, very few states are developed. And according to economic survey, only 3 states in India are attracting almost 90% of FDI. That is what we are saying, islands of prosperity. Rest of the country is not developed. These foreign investors, they will come and invest only in those places wherein there is already infrastructure. Will they go to backward regions? The backward regions will remain poor only. That is what we are saying here. Globalization would result in these kind of regional inequalities, widening inequalities between the different regions. That's what we said, creating islands of prosperity in an ocean of poverty. Next problem with globalization is that markets and is that it results in widening inequalities in the distribution of income and wealth. Rich people would become richer and poor people, UPSC aspirants, poorer. Right? That is what another problem. Can any economy survive with such widening inequalities? Obviously not. If this economic inequalities increase, then what happens? It can result in social and law and order problems also. It can lead to Naxalism. What is the reason why we have Naxalism? Economic inequalities. It can lead to regionalism. Again, economic inequalities. It can lead to secessionism, terrorism. So we must make sure that these inequalities are reduced. Similarly, another problem with these markets and globalization is that the private sector is not at all concerned about negative externalities, negative consequences of their actions. You have this, thermal power industries are there. They would be using coal. Coal is highly pollutant. and they will pollute the entire environment. Or these private coal-based thermal power plants are concerned about these kind of things, pollution. They're not at all concerned about the negative externalities, negative consequences of their actions. You have a pesticide factory, they will be releasing a lot of chemical waste into the local river, and people drink, when they drink the water, they will get a lot of health problems. Does that industry really bother about these health problems faced by the locals? No. This is a case study that was asked by UPSC. Please remember, all the case studies are only about day-to-day problems, because you are an administrator, and the case study says that you are working in that factory. What will you do? If you are working in that factory, chemical factory, will you make the fact public that you are pouring the local this chemical waste into the local rivers? If you don't, it is the people who suffer the most. What will you do? Yes, the management has said that anyone who makes this public will be punished, because management is only concerned about their profits. The easiest way to dispose of that chemical waste is to put into the local river. Let the people die. And the management says that we are doing patriotic things only, we are reducing population, and we should be given at least Bharat Ratna, right? And you are working there, what will you do? That is case study, right? These are all ethical dilemmas. That's what I said. There is neither absolute right nor completely wrong. So coming back here, this is what globalization. They are not at all concerned about anything else except their profits, and they are not at all concerned about the negative consequences of their actions. Next, another problem with the functioning of markets is that markets would always prefer monopoly. Any market player always prefer monopoly, and when you have monopoly, what is the consequence? A monopolist is neither concerned about the quality of services nor the price of the product. I have studied this monopoly and market forms in economy. Yes, what difference between monopoly and perfect competition? Yes, in a perfect competition, consumer is the king, he will decide everything, whereas in a monopoly, producer is the king, he will decide anything. People suffer in the form of low quality of services and very high price that a monopolist charge. It is the responsibility of the government to make sure that there would not be any monopolies. That is what we say the role of public administration. And similarly, private sector, they will not invest in what is called human capital. They don't invest in education or health, and they will invest in education and health only in those areas where it is profitable for them, urban areas. What about rural areas? Again, it is the responsibility of the government. Similarly, private sector would not improve infrastructure in rural areas. As we have discussed with the self-help groups, banking, private banks will never open any branches in rural areas because it is not profitable for them. And who has to take care of all of them? Government. Similarly, private sector, are they concerned about the scheduled castes or scheduled tribes? Because for them, recruitment, the only thing that is merit. And who will take care of these weaker sections? Government. That is what we say role of public administration in the age of globalization. They have to prevent market failures. They have to prevent market monopolies. They have to minimize the negative consequences. They must protect the ecological systems. They must ensure inclusive and equitable growth. They must provide opportunities for each and every section of society, especially at the bottom of the pyramid, to develop themselves. And another thing is that with the markets will take care of only the demand of the people but not the needs of the people. That is what we say. They will take care of only the demand but not the needs. What the difference between demand and needs? We say that these markets, private sector, they will take care of only the demands of the people but not the needs of the people. What is the difference? Okay, let me tell you, right? Please, you need a conceptual clarity, whatever you study, whatever the subject, whatever the topic you study, make sure that you have conceptual clarity. Demand has two important components: desire and ability. Desire and ability, right? When do you become part of the markets? When you demand. When do you become a consumer? One, when you have desire. Second, when you have ability. For example, right now, what is the market for, say, Mercedes-Benz cars? Out of 1.4 billion people, the latest cars, 10 crores, maybe 100, 200, 200 consumers, 300 consumers, right? Because only they have the ability. What about the desire? How many of you will say no if you are given the latest Mercedes-Benz car? At least, how many of you will say no if you are given the private jet for yourself? Okay, very difficult to imagine. How many of you will say no when you are given bicycle? Yes, you will say no? Very good, because I can understand your economic condition. Right? That is what we say. Demand includes desire and ability. That is the reason why you go to any village in the country, you find Pepsi and Coke being available freely. Freely means not free, being available everywhere. But you don't have any safe drinking water. That is what we say. You don't find any safe drinking water. Because markets will not produce anything that is needed by people. People want water. People want enough food. And who are the people here? Poor people. Are they part of the markets? No. So who have to take care of the interests of these poor people? Government. That is what we say, role of public administration in the age of globalization. It is the responsibility of the government to take care of the needs of those people who are not part of markets. It is a responsibility. Rich people can take care of themselves, that's not a problem at all. But it is the poor people whose needs have to be taken care of by the government. Their food, their water, their education, their health, their infrastructure. It is the responsibility of the government. Can the government leave all those poor people to their fate, saying that to take care of yourself? Obviously not. That is the reason why we say public administration should be there. This is the role of a public administration in the age of globalization. The government has to make sure that the regulatory authorities function effectively to prevent the emergence of monopolies. And we have said these regulatory authorities have been a failure because Competition Commission of India has failed to prevent monopolies. This year the question was asked. It has said that Competition Commission of India has been successful in preventing the multinational companies from dominating Indian markets. The question. That is what we say, role of public administration in the age of globalization. Similarly, the SEBI, Security and Exchange Board of India, must prevent this stock market scams. Telecom Regulatory Authority of India must prevent the monopolization of a telecom sector. This is what the role of public administration. They must ensure level playing field. They must prevent monopolies They must protect the interests of consumers. They must also protect the interests of small producers. These are all the things that public administration has to perform. The state has to perform in the age of globalization. So let us take all these points. Yes? What break? All right. Why do you need any break? I am asking why. Right. That's what I said in our first classes also. Now also I am repeating. If you cannot concentrate continuously for 3 hours, you don't have any right to prepare for UPSC, because in the main examination you are writing 3 hours continuously, 20 questions. Can you ask in the examination hall, give us 10 minutes break? You can take, no problem. And it will be a long break, not 10 minutes, 1 year. Next year also you have to write a mains. And how many of you have started practicing writing answers for 3 hours? Even now also you are writing every day one answer only. That also you are not writing. How many of you have started writing answers for 3 hours? It's more than, I think, 1 year of your preparation. By this time you must have done at least optional 3 hours. Yes? And the GS, the papers which you have completed. Practice. When will you practice? When will you practice? When you are writing, as I said, make sure that your first attempt will be your best attempt. When you take the prelims next year, you must be clearing prelims, mains as well as interview in one go. That is where you need to have that kind of proper plan also. Since you started early compared to others, you cannot give any excuses also. Start practicing for 3 hours, writing answers, 20 questions. Because it is not as easy as you think. You need a lot of practice, right? At least start with 1 hour, and then progress to 2 hours, and then finally 3 hours. Very important. And how many of you have completed your optional till now? Not yet completed? When will you complete? Next year. Do it fast. Anyway, you can take break and come back, right? After that, we will look at this impact of globalization. So let us look at this impact of globalization on public administration and the role of the state. How the role of public administration as well as that of the state has changed, has transformed with globalization. Let us take down a few lines about these things. And of course, you start writing fast also. Yes? Let us see. After half an hour, none of your body parts should be functioning. Huh? You have one more class today. Very good. 6 o'clock? 5. Okay, fine. Sorry. Okay. So you are only becoming classical, Attending so many classes, you are becoming classical. And of course, you get a lot of material and you become materialistic also. Right? By the way, what is that class? Environment. Okay, very good. So, write down. Globalization is the process of integrating a country's political, economic, administrative, social and cultural systems with the rest of the world. That is what we say globalization. It means you are integrating your political, economic, administrative, social and cultural systems with the rest of the world. Next, immediately after independence, India has opted for state-led economic growth and development. Public administration performed all activities. Including regulatory and developmental functions. They conducted elections, maintained law and order, ran public sector enterprises, controlled private sector through licenses, quotas and permits. Implemented developmental and welfare schemes. And ultimately were responsible for socio-economic transformation. But it ultimately led to the failure of a state. Forcing the government to opt for liberalization, privatization and globalization. With the advent of globalization, ADVENT, advent of globalization, there has been a drastic change in the role of state and public administration. In realizing objectives of growth and development. Next paragraph, changing the role of public administration. In the age of globalization can be defined in the following manner. in the following manner. Next paragraph. The functions or activities to be performed by the state can be broadly divided into the following categories. First, so what we are saying here is that what the state or public administration is expected to do in the age of globalization. For the sake of understanding, what we are saying is that it can be divided into 3 categories. What are they? First, those activities which are to be exclusively performed by the state, even in the age of complete privatization and globalization. What we are saying here, these activities have to be performed only by the state. They cannot be privatized. They cannot be given to the private sector. So what are the activities which have to be performed by the public administration only, which cannot be given to the private sector? Education and health are performed by private sector also. Okay, defense, law and order. Okay, foreign policy. Railways can be privatized. They should be privatized. Yeah. Next. What are the activities which have to be performed exclusively by the state, which cannot be privatized? Revenue collection. Pardon? Atomic energy, that can be privatized. Our government is already inviting private sector there. Nuclear energy, government is always inviting private sector. Adani is given this contract also, don't worry. Right? They are taken care of. Think about yourself, right? Judiciary. Can you privatize judiciary? Can you have a Supreme Court bench sponsored by Adani? Adani. Right? Or another bench sponsored by Ambani. They will say that they will pay the salaries of all the judges, no problem. But only thing is that the judges will have to look at only their cases. That is what. You cannot privatize judiciary. You cannot privatize army. You cannot privatize law and order. You cannot privatize international relations. Can you privatize lawmaking? Can the parliament say that let this year, Adani make our industrial policy? Of course, that is taking place. That's a different thing. We will not go into those. We will not go into all those things. Can it be done in a formal manner? No, that is what lawmaking. These are all the activities which have to be performed only by the state, even in the complete age of privatization or globalization. That is what you write. Lawmaking, internal security, defense, judiciary, international relations, revenue generation, are some of the activities which should be exclusively performed by the state. Which should be exclusively performed by the state. So we can never privatize them. The first category. Second category. What are those activities in the second category? Write down those activities which can be extensively performed if not exclusively by the private sector. If not exclusively by the private sector. So what are the activities which can be given to the private sector? What are the activities which can be given to the private sector where you don't require governmental intervention? That is what we say, minimum government and maximum governance. So what are the activities where the government can give it to the private sector? That is what we write. Any activity whose basic objective is profit maximization. Profit maximization can be extensively performed by private sector. Can be extensively performed by private sector without any governmental intervention, without any state intervention, without any state intervention. Profit maximization means give it to the private sector. Let them perform all those activities. The third category, those activities which can be performed by both the government and the private sector, both government and private sector, and also a combination of both. What is combination of government and private sector? Public-private partnerships. That is what you write. PPP. Combination of both. Public-private partnerships. So where do you have this public-private partnerships? That is what you write. Infrastructure and industrialization. Infrastructure and industrialization. Infrastructure and industrialization. So that is what we say broadly the role of the state in the age of globalization. We are dividing that into three categories. Those activities which have to be exclusively performed by the state, even in the worst case of privatization or globalization. Those activities which can be extensively performed by the private sector. And third, those activities which can be performed by both the state and the markets through public-private partnerships. Then let us proceed and look at what are the exact functions to be performed by the state on the basis of these three activities. What the state is expected to do in this age of globalization. Functions of a state are public administration. Functions of state are public administration. Or public administration in the age of globalization and liberalization. What are they? Write down. Functioning of markets. First point. Functioning of markets always results in the creation of islands of prosperity. Islands of prosperity in an ocean of poverty. For example, in India, only very few states are developed, whereas the rest of the country remains poor and backward. Poor and backward. Private sector, same point. Private sector invests, INVESTS, invests only in those areas wherein infrastructure is fully developed. Next paragraph. It is the responsibility of the government, the same point. It is the responsibility of the government to ensure balanced regional development, BRD. Balanced regional development by giving more emphasis to what? By giving more emphasis to backward states. You have to develop the backward states so that they can also be developed at par with the rest of the country. Next problem. Private sector or multinational companies. Private sector or multinational companies are not at all concerned, CONCERNED, about negative externalities. Negative externality, EXTERNALITIES. That is, they are not concerned about negative consequences of their actions. They are only interested in their profits. For example, polluting industries are not concerned about what? Environmental degradation. It is the responsibility of the state to protect ecological systems and realize the objectives of sustainable development. Realize the objectives of sustainable development. Next problem. There is no perfect competition. There is no perfect competition in the functioning of markets. In the functioning of markets. There is no perfect competition in the functioning of markets. Functioning of markets usually results in creation of monopolies, and oligopolies. Oligopoly, O-L-I-G-O-P-O-L-I-E-S. Oligopoly means in imperfect markets we talk about three different forms. First one is monopoly, second one is duopoly, third one is oligopoly. What are they? This is a part of microeconomics. UPSC nowadays is asking these questions and you have replies. Be good with your microeconomics. Very important. Right? Monopoly means single seller. There is only one single service provider. There is no competition. Can you give me the example of monopoly in India? Okay, railways. And you also want to print currency or what? Yes, sir. Please print currency and give it to me. Right? Not RBI currency, not your currency. Right? Anything? Railways, we have monopoly. And anything else? Defense also, we have public-private partnerships. Railways also don't complete monopoly because we have private sector participation in railways. There is no single sector in India which can have absolute monopoly at this point of time. Even railways also we have public-private partnership. We also have privatization. Some of the routes are privatized also. So there is no complete monopoly in India as such. A duopoly means you have two sellers for the product. Can you give me the example of duopoly? When you have only two sellers. Pardon? Come again. Zomato and Swiggy. 24 hours you think about only food. Okay, let me extend your food to beverages also. Pepsi and Coke. Duopoly. And then telecom sector. Reliance Jio. Baki sab maro. Right. Reliance Jio and Airtel. Duopoly. Right. And oligopoly means few sellers. And what are the examples of oligopoly? In India, examples of oligopoly. Airlines industry in India, dominated by few people. Tatas, and then who else? Of course, airlines will be difficult for you to know. You must have seen something flying at 45,000. Yes, SpiceJet, Indigo. There is no Kingfisher. Kingfisher is gone. Yes, Vistara part of Tata's only. Yes, Akasha is not there, it must be there, I think. Someone is saying Bornavita and Horlicks. We can never go beyond food. There are two different types of people in the world. One who eat to live, second who live to eat. We belong to second category. Right. So that is what we say oligopoly. We don't have any perfect competition. You take any sector in India, we have only oligopoly, very few sellers. Take the case of cement industry, oligopoly. Take the case of petroleum, oligopoly. Ports, monopoly. Right? That is what we say. Why? Because the functioning of markets, there is no perfect competition anywhere else in the world. What you have only is imperfect competition in the form of monopoly, duopoly and oligopoly. So because of this imperfect competition, who will benefit? It is only the producers, the sellers. That is where the state becomes important. So that is what you write. State must make sure that monopolies are prevented and competition is encouraged. In the functioning of a private sector. In the functioning of the private sector. In the age of globalization, governance means regulation. The state, with the help of regulatory authorities, must ensure level playing field in the markets. Next point. Functioning of markets also results in widening of inequalities. Functioning of markets also results in widening of inequalities in the distribution of income and wealth. Widening of inequalities in the distribution of income and wealth. It is the responsibility of the state. To ensure inclusive and equitable growth and development. To ensure inclusive and equitable growth and development. Next point. Markets take care of the interests of only the demands of people. But they do not satisfy the needs of people. They do not satisfy the needs of people. Poor people are not part of markets. Poor people are not part of markets. Poor people are not part of markets. It is the responsibility of the state to take care of those who do not come under the forces of market. Who do not come under the forces of market? Who do not come under the forces of market? Poor people. Next point. Functioning of markets. Functioning of markets mostly results in business cycles. What are these business cycles? What is a business cycle or economic cycle? What is a business cycle or economic cycle? This is what we call a business cycle. Have you heard about these things? Right? Macroeconomics. Boom, recession, depression, recovery, and ultimately it results in again boom. Right? That is what we call a business cycle. Boom, recession, depression, and recovery. Cyclical aspect of economic growth and development. Right now, where India is exactly? We are recovering from the recession and depression caused by COVID. Right? So, what happens with these business cycles? It adversely impacts people. And who has to protect the people? That is what you write. These business cycles adversely impacts poorer sections of societies. For example, during a recession, poor people, during recession, more population will experience poverty. It is the responsibility of the state. To reduce the negative impact of these business cycles on weaker sections of society. That is what another important function to be performed by the state. Next function to be performed by the state. Private sector is not concerned about qualitative aspects of development. Qualitative aspects of development. Economic growth is necessary but not sufficient. Social sector development is much more significant than economic growth. Is much more significant than economic growth. It is much more significant than economic growth. Private sector does not give importance to the interests of INTERESTS, the interests of weaker sections of society. It is the responsibility of the state to protect and promote the interests of these weaker sections. Through public policies. Right? This is another function. Next, rural development is an area which is not given enough importance by the private sector. As most of the development is concentrated in urban areas. It is the responsibility of the state to develop rural areas. By investing in both the physical and the social infrastructure. Next, education and health. Next point, education and health are part of both government and private sector. But the problem is of affordability. AFFORDABILITY, affordability. It is not possible for poor people. To avail of AVAIL, of quality services, to avail of quality services provided by the private sector, Definitely private sector is providing quality services, education as well as health. But is it possible for the poor people? That's what you say. It is the responsibility of the state. It is the responsibility of the state to make sure that poorest sections of our society also have access to quality education and health. Right. So this is another function that is to be performed by the state in the age of globalization. Next function. See, these are all the things which you are expected to do when you get into civil services. Role of public administration. So think again whether you want to prepare for this examination or not. 1 year is not a very significant period of time. You can still take a decision. Can you do all these things? Don't worry. Your predecessors who are there in the services, they never performed these functions. So people don't have any expectations from you. You get into services and think about yourself only. Right? But write all these things in the examination. You will get marks. Very important. Because both in governance and ethics papers, every year the same questions are asked. Next function. What else are there? Disaster management. Disaster management is not an activity which is performed by private sector. It is not an activity which is performed by private sector. It is the responsibility of the state. It is the responsibility of the state to take care of the victims of disaster management. The victims of disaster management. So during the corona crisis, who had come to the rescue of the people? State. Who has provided vaccines to the people? State. Did Ambani provide you vaccines? No. That is what we say, disaster management. So this is what we say. These are all the functions to be performed by the state or public administration in the age of globalization. So finally we have to come to a conclusion also. What is exactly the role of the state? So what do we say here? Right now the question is coming up frequently because we are living in this age of a multi-actor paradigm model of development, wherein so many institutions are responsible for development. On the one hand, you have the state, you have the central government, state governments, local self governments, you have bureaucracy, you have a private sector, you have multinational companies, you have multilateral institutions, you have media, you have civil society organizations, NGOs, pressure groups, self-help groups. All of them are part of governance. So then we have to ask the question here, what the state, what bureaucracy, what administrators are expected to do. Recently a conference was held in Delhi of young IAS officers, and that is what the conference was about. What is the role of this bureaucracy in this age of multi-actor paradigm model of development. Collectors from various states had come to participate in the conference, and that is when they were discussing about these things. And some of our students were also part of this conference. As usual, they said that, sir, please tell us what should we write there. I said that our contract was over long time back to get you into civil services IAS. After that, you will be working for 6p. Earn money and transfer to my account, which you have not done. And now on top of it, you are coming back for services also. This is exploitation. Article 23, I said. Okay. They said that it is true. But can you say no to us? Think it twice. Why? Because immediately, tomorrow newspapers, a dreaded Naxalite from Andhra Pradesh was caught moving suspiciously in Delhi. A young dynamic officer, right, indulged in a severe battle, and the Naxalite was ultimately neutralized. And do you want that kind of life for you? I said, don't worry, I will tell you all those things. Come, and I'll take you class for again 2 hours. Right? So that is what, because when you go into services, all of you are going to be administrators. And what you require is knowledge of administration. As we discuss later, civil services reforms. Recruitment. Why should the UPSC test you in ancient history? Why should the UPSC test you in ancient history? Or why should you know about sedimentary rocks? When you are becoming an income tax officer, in what way your knowledge of sedimentary rocks helps you to become a good income tax officer? Do you require the knowledge of sedimentary rocks? Why? You will be taxing that rock also, saying that 18% GST should be imposed along with 33% income tax on that rock. If the rock does not pay the tax, it will be broken. That is where we talk about civil services reforms. We need badly reforms in the functioning of in the whole of our civil services, from recruitment to removal, everywhere. Right? Anyway, those things we will be discussing later. So coming back here, what we require is the knowledge of only administration, because all of you are going to be administrators. And that is where UPSC is also thinking. 2017, Baswan committee appointed by UPSC has recommended drastic changes in the whole recruitment process. What are those changes? We will see later. So coming back here, this is what we are saying here. We are living in this age of multi-actor paradigm, which so many institutions are responsible. So what is the role of administration here? What are they expected to do? What are they expected to do? That is what we say. Private sector might ensure efficient utilization of resources. NGOs and civil society organizations can ensure participation of citizens. But it is only the state that can realize the objectives of nation building. The state will always be there, should always be there, must always be there. Because it is only the state that can realize the objectives of nation building. It is only the state that can force the people, that can motivate the people to sacrifice their self-interest and work for the society. For example, during the corona crisis, when the government had imposed this complete lockdown, everyone had accepted it. Did the people come out on the streets and to revolt against the government? Why? Because the state enjoys credibility. If Mukesh Ambani comes and says that let us have lockdown today, we will lock him up. Right? That is what the private sector does not enjoy credibility. State only enjoys credibility. That is where we say the importance of the state. So in the age of globalization, what we say is that what really matters is not the size of administration, the quantity of state intervention. What really matters is the quality of administration, quality of governance. That is the reason why our Prime Minister has come out with the slogan, minimum government and maximum governance. So what it requires is that the state must facilitate the private sector development and growth. The state must ensure participation of citizens. The state must realize the objectives of good governance, so that your growth can be sustained for longer periods of time, which is both inclusive as well as equitable. That is what we say, as part of conclusion. Right, that conclusion. So what do we say? Right, private sector might ensure efficient utilization of resources. Efficient utilization of resources. NGOs and civil society organizations. NGOs and civil society organizations might ensure participation of citizens. Might ensure participation of citizens in governance. But it is only the state. It is only the state that can help in realizing the objectives of nation building. The state can inculcate a sense of nationalism and patriotism. A sense of nationalism and patriotism in the minds of citizens. And it can also make people sacrifice their self-interest for the sake of the country. Next paragraph. To conclude, the question is not the quantity of a state interference. In the age of liberalization and globalization. But the quality of it. Big government does not automatically mean better governance. As pointed out by our Prime Minister, because these things are asked by UPSC only. Nowadays, if you look at the question paper, they are mostly praising the government and government programs. So that is why we are talking about this. As pointed out by our Prime Minister, in the age of liberalization and globalization. In the age of liberalization and globalization, the government has no business. The government has no business to be in business. You can underline this. The government has no business to be in business. Minimum government and maximum governance. Minimum government and maximum governance clearly describes the role of the state in the age of globalization. In the age of globalization. That is what we say. This is what ultimately we say, the role of the state in the age of globalization. You must have minimum government but maximum governance. Big government does not automatically mean better governance. The size of the government has nothing to do with the quality of governance. That is the reason why we have mentioned the number of ministries and departments should be reduced from 57 to less than 27. That is what we have mentioned. We spoke about merger of ministries and departments. We spoke about reducing the number of hierarchical levels within the government from 16 to 4. These are all part of governance reforms which we have to implement. And we have to make sure that this public-private partnership is also improved. I am sure you must have studied about PPP. Right? All the reforms in the PPP. Yes? Yes, all those reforms. Which committee has recommended reforms in PPP? Last year it was asked for 15 marks in your economy. Who? Kelkar committee. What are the recommendations of Kelkar committee? Right, anyway, you study all those things. That is what we say. In the age of globalization, governance is all about regulation. You must be able to regulate the functioning of the private sector. You must be able to prevent these business cycles. You must be able to protect the interests of the weaker sections. You should be able to ensure inclusive growth. That is what the role of the state. Because the private sector functioning always results in the creation of monopolies and oligopolies. And the private sector is not at all concerned about externalities. Whereas there are certain functions which can never be privatized, even in the age of globalization and privatization. That is what we say. So proceeding further, as an extension of the topic that we have done, we have to look at this present model in governance called multi-actor paradigm model. Again, why we are discussing, it was asked for 15 marks in our governance. As I keep on saying, this governance is one topic where you can get maximum marks with minimum preparation, right? For example, take the case of your environment. It has same kind of weightage as governance in your mains. In fact, governance has more marks. And how many classes we are completing? Around 10-12 classes. And environment? Right? And include geography also? Exactly. That is what. So coming back here, that's what we keep on saying. UPSC preparation is always about optimization. Identifying those areas where you can score more marks. There are certain papers, in GS you have 4 papers, and along with that general essay also. You have to focus on these papers. Essay, you have to get maximum marks. Ethics, you have to score at least 130, 140 marks. And this governance and polity, you have to score at least 120, 125 marks. That is where you can. And rest of the topics, there are some topics where you cannot complete. Take the case of world history. You can read as much as you want. When they ask something, it will be part of history only for you. Right? So there are certain topics. Geography, you can read any amount of geography. When you see the question in the UPSC examination, you will become a geographer in exploring those questions. Right? So coming back here, what is this multi-actor paradigm model in governance? As we have mentioned, we are living in this age of multi-actor paradigm. If you look at governance, right? If you see governance in India at this point of time, multiple institutions are responsible for governance. We are living in a federal polity. So you have the union government, you have the state governments. Now, after 73rd, 74th amendments, you have local self-governments. They're all part of a political executive. Then you have bureaucracy. They are also responsible for governance. In the age of liberalization, you have the private sector, markets. Then you have multinational companies in the age of globalization. You also have multilateral institutions. All of them are part of governance. IMF, World Bank, United Nations, WTO. They always influence your governance decisions. Then you have this third sector, civil society organizations, NGOs, pressure groups. Then we have media. Please remember, role of media was asked for 125 marks in your essay. Almost everything is about governance, right? Then you have religious institutions, right? Nowadays, judiciary is also becoming a very important part of governance. With their judgments, they come out with judgments. That is why we have this question, judicial legislation. Judiciary is making so many legislations. Then we have the self-help groups. They are also part of governance. And then we have public-private partnerships. They are also part of governance. So when so many of them are a part of governance, the question here is, when so many of them are part of governance, the question here is, how now the decisions are taken and implemented. Governance means taking decisions and implementation of those decisions. What are the challenges and what are the solutions? Please remember, this is what, again, the essence of your entire ethics case studies. All of them are part of governance. Tomorrow, as a bureaucrat, how would you deal with media? How would you deal with NGOs? How would you deal with the private sector? How will you deal with MNCs? That is what part of governance. And how will you deal with the political executive? Two case studies were only about political executive. How will you deal with them? Because that is what you are going to do. It is becoming very, very difficult, complex and complicated. How you are going to deal with all those challenges? In this multi-actor paradigm model of governance, as an administrator, how we are going to deal with all those challenges? How we are going to take decisions and implement those decisions? That is what we say in a multi-actor paradigm. I think those things we can see tomorrow. Right? You said that you have class again, so I don't want to take away your free time. Right? Tomorrow we will see these things. I think tomorrow we have class, I think. Yes. And then tomorrow we will also look at a very important topic, Max Weber's bureaucratic theory also.